Hello, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Man Speak. Man Speak is a series which we created as an offshoot to our Heart Warrior series. And our Heart Warrior series is the series that we're interviewing men about their journey into the heart. And of course, some of those men have got teachings, knowledge, wisdom, practical insights around certain topics that merit a whole episode. So today we have our number 17 Heart Warrior back again, and he's done several episodes if you do want to check them out on my channel. And that is the incredible Justin Carpenter. Justin is a truth seeker, truth speaker, and esoteric wizard that has got all that juicy stuff for us to really get a good grasp on I guess the analysis of where we're going and where we're heading. And to his chosen topic today is the great inversion and our return to righteousness. And this is fascinating because it's really through our understanding of how we've been deceived that we can now flip the switch and take the power back. So really looking forward to this interview. Enjoy. Hey, Justin Carpenter, welcome back to Man Speak.
Hey, Gemma, thanks for having me once again. It's always an absolute pleasure to be here. So I'm excited for this conversation, which should be another beautiful one. So thanks for having me.
Oh, definitely. Now, this is such a fascinating topic, and one that I really feel there needs to be a great awareness of before we can, flip the inversion. So, the great inversion and our return to righteousness. So, there's sort of two parts to this, right? Shall we start with the great inversion?
Yeah, let's start with that, because in order for us to be able to transmute this sort of darker aspects of our experience right now, the sort of undesirable elements, we have to first examine it. That's the first step for transmuting darkness. You have to first observe it, and through the observation, it loses its power, it loses its grip. So just like with our ego, because that's all it is this manifestation of our egoic out of control into this space, and that's what's created this reality that we're in now. The way that we address the problems within that is by first looking at it, first observing it, and seeing it for what it actually is. So that's always a huge and powerful step to that. So what is the great inversion? Well, it's this first acknowledgement that everything that we've been taught is based on a lie. It's all distorted. It's all moved into this space that nothing is true. They can't allow any truth to remain. They can't allow any truth to be consistent within this space. So how did they flip us upside down on our heads? How did they keep every ounce of truth away from us and keep us away from our innate connection with ourselves and ultimately with God? They couldn't have done it right away. And when I say they, it's just any aspect of ourself that's trying to take advantage of another. So when we are stuck in this sort of controlling kind of mindset where I'm trying to take from another, then I am, in that moment, I am a they. I am no longer part of this connection. I'm no longer a part of this knowledge, this understanding that I am connected to all. And somehow I've abdicated my sense of connection into this ability to be able to harm another part of me, to be able to take from another part of me. So that's the they, and it's us. It is us. It's a part of us. But in order to truly address it, we have to do so in this kind of way where so continuing on, this was this initial disconnection point that got us to be able to justify harming another part of ourselves. When we are disconnected, then this is the only space that allows this kind of insanity to creep in, this madness to distort our reality into the space to where I'm willing to take from another part of me, essentially, because we're all one. There is no separation, there is no disconnection really, but there's the illusion of such. There's this perception of separation. So how do you take this? And that's essential. There's an essential part of this creation, because if I didn't actually view myself as separate to some degree, then I would lose this body and this experience and this idea that I can communicate with you in this sort of way. But so it's essential from that perspective, but it's also tricky, because if we fall too deeply into it, we can lose ourselves into that, and then we can justify harming another part of me. And so that's where the initial disconnection was really bombarded, to drive home that potentiality of falling into that space and augmenting that to the umpteenth degree. So how did they do this? First we have to go back to the beginning. Like what do we know, and where do we start from? We start from the beginning, where we are all part of this one creation, and we are just a fragment of this whole. This is God giving us this experience, and God is the totality of all of us. God giving us this experience so that God could see himself, so God could view, and I say him, it doesn't matter, but it's just God could see itself. God could see ourself. This is just this experience that we're having. That's why my perception is perceived as different than yours, because it.
So
go ahead.
we can see ourselves.
Yes. Absolutely. So that we could see ourselves from a whole bunch of different perspectives, all at the same time, all from the same infinite number of varieties, all to see ourselves in that perspective. But the grounding point that we came from is that God is the totality, and that God is good. And so therefore creation is good. So this creation is good, and that is the fundamental. Like, when you're connected with that, when you're connected with everyone around you and everything around you, and you know that it's good, then there's no way to get inverted. But you have to maintain that. You have to really, and it's natural. It doesn't take a lot of work to hold on to that aspect. It's a natural state of being that we all live in and are in. But we can be conditioned away from that. We can be step by step programmed away from this space that God is good, this creation is good, that I'm a part of that. And so that's the initial inversion, is to start slowly chipping away at that initial viewpoint. And how do you do that? But it's to continue devolving our perspective into this as if my relative perspective trumps and is higher than the totality perspective, as if my individualized ability to see myself is somehow can dictate what is good and what is not. So when I start to try and define good, then I can start to justify good as being something else than what it is naturally. And so this just continued down the line. Like they couldn't do it all at once. We can't go from, like, we see the result of evil in this realm. We see very clearly what they're capable of, how it gets to the nastiness that they can do. I mean, you're talking about people who harvest children for this kind of sake. They harvest purity at that level. Like, that's disgusting. But they can't immediately go into this space of like pulling people into that level of evil, or even any level of evil, because we would identify it, we'd recognize it, we'd see it, and we'd say, no, we're not playing that, we're not doing that. So how did they pragmatically shift us away? It was bit by bit by bit, but it starts with that initial inversion, where all of a sudden you're making good subjective, you're making good relative, you're making good definable. As soon as we start to try and define what good is, and say that this is my sense of what good is, and it's different than your sense of what good is, instead of recognizing that good is just inherent, it's natural, it's our natural state, and we're connected to that, then all of a sudden I can start introducing these mind games into myself to slippery slope, step down this line to where all of a sudden morals all become extremely relative. And if morals are relative, if my idea on what good is, and I put the idea in there, I constructed it with my thought, and it has nothing to do with what is natural. When I can do that enough, then I can start to justify doing anything. I can start this slippery slope path down into hell, which is where we've gotten to eventually. And it was a very pragmatic stepping stone, slippery slope approach to get to that point, and it comes from a degradation through all these different forms of government and all these different ideas where we're abdicating our own sense of connection and our own self-responsibility to acknowledge and do the right thing. To acknowledge that naturally we all want to do the right thing. Naturally, we want to be connected. Naturally, we see each other as connections. But if it's driven home hard enough and for a long enough period of time, then we start to believe these tricks. We start to really think that it's real, that all of a sudden I'm not connected. Oh, now I'm a worthless sinner that can amount to nothing. I have no place within God's creation, or that the satanic inversion, which is that I am God, but I'm a better God than anybody else. And then it flips into this elitist version of this perspective. It's like, no, I am an infinite fragment of the totality, no better or worse than anybody. And so if I start viewing myself as somehow superior, then again, I'm inverted. I'm viewing my relative perception as somehow better than or worse than. Either way is taking me away from my throne. It's taking me away from this inherent connection with all that is around us. And anytime that starts to happen, it's a path towards hell, and it's a path towards this space to where we're no longer in having compassion. Like I did a show, Decoding Tool, the other night, and it talked about atrophy, that the cold stillness builds atrophy of compassion. So when we have this disconnected state and we're staying away from everybody or everything, and we purposely build these walls, and sometimes we have to build the walls because the world is traumatizing us. And so again, they introduce these different things through trauma to step us into this space. So we have to build these defense mechanisms, but then through that space of being defensive, we become isolated and more disconnected and more disconnected and more disconnected. And then all of a sudden I have no compassion because I'm afraid of everything around me. I have no sense of reference to stay in that connection point. And so it really is, it's like slowly boiling the frog. They can't do it all at once. The frog jumps right out of it. It feels it, it senses it. But if they can do it slowly enough over time, then we don't recognize that we're falling into this degradation of ourselves and this degradation of this initial connection point. I just did, and what kind of prompted this conversation was I just did a beautiful presentation with a guy named Darth Phaedrus, or goes by the name Darth Phaedrus, and so that's on my website, which we'll put a link up in the description. And I can't even begin to go into the depth that he goes into this presentation, but he beautifully breaks down this process of taking us off of our seat of power, taking us off of this initial connection point and into these other forms of limitations that are self-imposed limitations, self-imposed relative mindsets that somehow push away the totality, push away this connection point, and get me to isolate and put my blinders up so I can do anything. I can justify any action, any behavior, any sort of whatever. So he does a really good job at that. But just to kind of simplify the sort of pragmatic stepping stones from a government standpoint, what we inherently know is the rightful rulership, and the highest form of government should always be the family. The family should be the only form of governing body that exists within society. Nothing should be above that. Nothing should have authority above that. Nothing should have any sort of sense of control over that point. And even the family, it's still a group of sovereigns. So it's just the choice whether to be within that family or not. And no one's forced to be there. No one has to be there. So the sovereign, the sovereign is really the ultimate, the penultimate. We are connected with God, and nothing takes us away from that point. But then from that family as the highest form of government, then you move towards republicanism, which is where we shifted towards this idea that we have to have representatives, and we're not able to govern ourselves. We're not able to do these kinds of things ourselves. And then that shifts into democracy, and democracy is like that even the many have to govern everybody else. So this is where this mob rule mentality comes into play. And so then all it takes is people to steer the many to get whatever they want to. So that's where that power is derived from. And then that shifts into the sort of communism, fascism, or socialism, which is the worst form of government. And in the terms of it, this is steering us into this further consolidation of power under all sorts of different illusions, but it's with the same goal of pushing us towards this complete inversion of who we are, and being this able to justify any sort of behavior. And that's where evil is introduced, because once you can start justifying anything, then it's all relative to me. So if I want this, then it's good to me, even though that's not really good. But from my relative perception, it becomes as such. So it has, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing. This is just so good. I've got so much to say, but I'm like, just wrong. I've got like, but I don't even know where to start, because this is just massive. It's massive. And it just feels so good to have the awareness, because, from the awareness, then we can create the new reality. And I mean, basically, can we boil it down to, if someone wanted to overtake planet Earth or overtake humanity, this is how they've done it, by just creeping in slowly, infiltrating into the points of power, changing the system so we need external power, creating controlling the education system. So from birth, we're taught what they want us to teach, controlling the media, controlling entertainment, burning books, getting rid of the parts of history they don't want us to know about, feeding us what we should do and eat and be, defining success as having a big house and 2 cars and debt and a high position, and that's what humanity's born into, and that's how slowly they've infiltrated and waged this war on humanity to disconnect us from the divine source that we are.
Very well said. And it shows up in infinite number of ways, and how they've pulled off this scam of all scams, this scheme of all schemes, to trick us away from our inherent divinity. And that's really all it comes down to, is this innate connection with God, with totality, that we cannot lose. We ultimately cannot lose. They cannot take it from us, but they can trick us into believing that we've lost it. And when we believe that we've lost it, then all of a sudden it's just the conditioning of whoever is in charge at that time, whoever is the one driving the show, whoever is the one we are. I mean, ultimately, when we're unconscious, we are programmable very easily. We're like a computer, and it can be very easily programmed in whatever direction. And so if we're not taking ownership of that process, if we're not staying in our seat of power and saying, no one else has any right to do that, because I'm receiving from the divine will, and that's the only space that I want to receive any input. I'm not going to receive your inputs and tell me that that's how I have to be. But until we make that decision to come back to that space, then it does just keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and there's no end. That's why you cannot give the parasite anything. You cannot give the left brain anything, because as soon as you give it an inch, it takes a mile. It starts to justify. It's like, to give it more and more and more. So that's where this beautiful allegory of paying the 10%, the tithing, which has nothing to do with paying any church, nothing at all with paying any church at all. It's paying that 10% left brain to God and saying, I don't want to be in that space. I want you to use my thinking brain. It's not that I don't have thoughts. It's not that I don't have will, but I'm paying that to you, so that the only time I ever do use that, it's with your guidance. It's with that divine will, that divine flow. So it comes through me in that sort of way, and never otherwise. As soon as I start to get into that conscious thought, where I'm trying to structure everything and plan and plot everything, always trying to think my way through things, then we're not trusting. We're not trusting that we are connected. We're not trusting that we're in that space of always divine flow, and we're apt to be steered in whatever direction by whoever wants to come dangle a shiny object in front of us and lead us in whatever sense of direction. We are vulnerable. We are weak at that point, and when that happens, then we're going to be taken advantage of. This is just kind of unfortunately, that this is, well, fortunately, or however you want to look at it, it's the natural order of things. If we're not in the driver's seat, then something, if we're not the ones doing if we're not conscious in our being, then somebody else will step in and drive us. It's just, that's a natural part of it. I mean, and it shows up even in relationships, you know, the whole victim abuser construct. You know, if that victim is just as responsible for that relationship as the abuser, and while that's a triggering topic, and while a lot of people don't like to hear that kind of stuff, there is it is, that situation was created in order to have that victim learn that they're not a victim, and step out and reclaim their power and not continue giving it away. And the abuser, in that same sort of space, they were attracted to that idea so that they could learn that they can't take advantage of people like that, so that someone would finally stand up to them and tell them no, you know, so that we can snap out of these constructs and in these self-limiting beliefs and truly shine to our highest potential. And that's ultimately that all God ever wants to lead us to. So even in these moments where we've fallen so far into this inverted state, God is still good, and God still is able to use this opportunity for us for the highest good. So while it's not a desirable outcome, and while we should very much take this to heart and never, ever, ever do this ever again at this level of depravity, we can still transmute this experience for the highest good and have this to be the greatest potential energy, that compression of a spring, you know, all the way down to that highest compression point, and then we can fly to new heights. And that's what we're doing right now, you know. So it's amazing from that perspective. Again, not to want to do it like this again necessarily, but but we can still transmute it. We can alchemize this experience to really help drive this point home, so that we don't create this scenario in the future. But it is really helpful to see that everything that they've done has been off this initial point of disconnection. And so if we reclaim that, I'm not saying that automatically we're going to be able to just remove all forms of government and everything like that. Like we are not in a good state in order to be able to do that. That would introduce far more calamity. That would take far longer to really reestablish. So it's about pragmatically moving back from the lie that they put us into. So we have to recognize that this has been a horrible experience. And then every ounce of anyone within power, which we shouldn't be giving anybody power, but anyone who's a leader within this space has to answer to us and say, you better be working to reverse this curse. And if you're not, then you're fired. You're out of here. You're done. Like, we're not playing these games anymore. And so this is just this consistent kind of behavior to step us away from that level of depravity and back into this sense of balance and connection, so that we realize who we are and that no one can ever take that from us, and we shouldn't let it. And that has to be done diligently, so that anytime anyone starts to come around and act like an insane person trying to control somebody, it's like, no, I'm not playing that game anymore. I've done this before. I know where there's heads. I've seen your strategy. I've seen your plan. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And then people who want to be crazy like that, it's very easy to identify. It's very easy to see. It's very easy to acknowledge and say, no, you go over there. You go play your crazy game somewhere else. And if you're doing crazy enough things, then we're going to take you out. Like, that's just how it's got to be. Once people cross certain lines, it's just one and done. I'm sorry, but you've made your choice within this realm, and this has to be consistent. Once somebody has inverted themselves to enough capacity, it's like, sorry, you're done for in this space. It's like Vladimir Putin said, I'm not the one who judges them. It's not my job to judge them, but it is my job to send them to the one who will. You know, because we need to not be holding on to any weight. But if somebody has committed crimes to the point to where they're willing to hurt their fellow man to that extent, then they are so lost in that space. And death is not the end, but death is an opportunity for them to have another chance and to right the ship, you know, to come back around. But we have to be consistent with that. We cannot be playing with this aspect. We cannot be, you know, entertaining these ideas anymore. So you know, hopefully this whole experience will drive us to that level of zealor and fervor that I will be speaking on consistently always.
And you know how I see it, Justin? I see it as, when I'm feeling my way through this, I see it as my world, which is different from your world, different from everyone else's world. So I just take the pieces that from, say, all possibilities in this realm, and I just take the pieces that feel good to me to create my world. So if there was a leader, for example, that I didn't resonate with, I would just take my focus off them and focus on the people that I do resonate with, you know, and just creating my world. And it's what we focus on is what we expand in our reality. So for me, it's just a matter of being aware and shifting focus, individual focus, from what we don't want to what we do want. Like, don't focus on the issues. Don't try and change the issues by actively getting out there and fighting them. Give your focus instead to what you want to create, the peaceful issue, and give your energy to that. That's what I do as an individual. Yeah, what do you think of that?
Well, I think it depends on what sort of scenario is playing out in order to move. Obviously the ultimate highest is to not have any of these sort of negative aspects that are taking advantage of others. But it does get tricky when there is this sort of taking advantage of somebody who is not able to protect themselves, when there's children involved, or when there's whatever, when there's that level of depravity being committed, then our attention needs to be razor focused on that issue, and we don't leave it until that's addressed. Collectively, we don't move away from that space until that has been established and taken care of. But then after that point, when we've gotten past a certain level of depravity being committed, then yeah, absolutely, our attention is where what gives things power. So if somebody is saying things that are out of line and whatever, and they get to be that way, it's like, okay, well, nobody's going to pay attention to you, so you're just going to be isolated in your own space. So naturally, that will happen over time. But given the magnitude of this inversion and the level of depravity that has been committed, there are very much things that we have to focus in on, very much so. And this is what I was talking about with this darkness that we do need to observe. We can't look away from it. We have to actually look into it and deal with it in whatever way needs to be done. So it is depending on the level. I think evil is such a, and Darth Vader gets into that in that presentation too, but evil is I mean, it's useless in our experience. It doesn't have any real bearing on providing a texture within the experience. There's good and there's bad, and bad is really just the absence of good. So bad is like choosing not to be good, choosing not to be in this sort of connected, augmenting, creative, serving kind of way. And bad is not necessarily like bad. It's not something to eliminate. It's just like, okay, well, if you want to choose to go that route, then so be it. But evil is this unhealthy byproduct of bad that has only been there because of such amount of inversion. And so that's where we have to address, is when it gets to that point of evil, when we can classify it. And I don't know where you'd actually draw the line, but people can kind of have an idea, is when it has that level to it, then it's like, okay, that's like a sickness that we need to address with vigor, with a very, very, very diligent approach, and ensuring that anytime that kind of stuff pops up again, it's just wiped out and it's done with. And it's not that we fight it. It's not that we're engaged with it. It's not that we spend a lot of time with it. We just do what needs to be done and move on. We just take care of it, and move on from it, and acknowledging that that's just an unhealthy aspect of this. It's a creation of this inversion. It's a byproduct of this inversion that, until, I'm sure, for a time, until we've come to a better sense of balance, there will need to be, and really always there needs to be a level of diligence applied here. But from a more overtly kind of physical level, there needs to be a quite a physical diligence applied to that, which is what the 17 plan was really all about, was this idea that there is this level of depravity going on. I mean, when you talk about children being harvested and taken, and there has to be something done, and we can't just sit idly by and just wait for us to kind of figure it out, and wait for us to just come around, because eventually we probably would, but I don't know how far into hell we would have fallen. And so, like, from a conscious, good perspective, like I can't with a good conscience sit by and let that happen, because when we do sit by and let those kind of things happen, we do kind of the karmic repercussions of having the influence to do something to stop harm being committed. If we don't take that, if we don't use that influence to stop that harm from being committed, then we're culpable. We're in the same boat of allowing that to happen. So there has to be that kind of persistence applied to it, so that we don't all suffer these same effects of these kinds of things happening. But very much so, once we've kind of established that and come back to a balance point within it, then we don't have to spend as much fervor into that kind of area always. But it's got to be naturally, it's going to be obvious for us to see when we can kind of let off of this sort of diligent approach. But my take is we're going to see some form of benevolent military influence for a long time, as we clean up this space. But it's going to be a military influence that we're in charge of, that reports to nobody else except us, and so it's going to be a righteous, rightfully established military that only answers to us and ultimately to God. And that's what the oath should be sworn to, is like anything that stands outside of that righteousness is not of God and should never be fought for. Never should, no form of force should ever be used to encourage something that's not righteous. And so once we get back to this natural state of who we are, and that God is good, creation is good, we're a part of that, and that's natural. We don't even have to define it. We don't even have to say that this is that or this is this. We just know this inherently. Once we get back to this space, then it's so easy to identify somebody who's outside of that. Like it's just going to be so blatantly obvious to us. I mean, it already is to an extent now. We have this intuitive ability to pick up on when somebody is in those kind of states, but we've lost that to some extent because we've lost our ability to have this intuition, or we've stopped listening to it. Intuition is always divinely given from this one source that is good. And when we don't listen to it, and when we try and construct our ideas of what that is, and try and think of, oh, this is my intuition, but I'm just thinking, then you're upside down again. You're in this inverted state where you're creating a false reality that's not tied to anything. It's not tied to your connection. You're in a disconnected state. So just coming back to that connection, as that's the firm starting point, and then everything else just happens naturally. Everything else happens as it needs to.
Yeah. I see it as, once you can tune into the divinity within you, how I see the metaphor is that, say God is the body and we are all individual cells in the body, and a healthy body, all systems, all organs, all every part of the body has to work together in healthy synchronicity. So some people, for example, are maybe the kidneys flushing out the waste in the greater good. Some people are the mental mind, and they're the thought process. Some people are the heart, channeling in love to to the body of God, and as within, so without. It's the metaphor of that. We all have a role to play, an important role, but we don't all have to do the same thing. And every system and organ has to work together to create a perfect, healthy system.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And that's why it's never good to prescribe a role to anybody on what they should do in each and every moment. But it's all with this, what are you doing? And is this serving creation? Is this serving the totality of all that is? Or what are you doing? And is it only serving the self? Is your intention behind that? Is that only serving, your isolated idea of who you are? And when we can recognize these actions and where they align to, then that becomes easier to see, okay, this person is obvious. I'm not going to tell them what to do, but what they are doing is clear to show that there is a disconnection within. And then that just becomes a lot more obvious to see who's in that state of being and who's not. So it's going to take, it's going to take some learning. This is quite a bit of unprogramming we have to do. We have to unlearn and relearn kind of who we are. But it happens very naturally and very quickly once you kind of remove the barriers and the conditioning and all these consistent inversion tactics that they've had to use, and that's why it won't be super difficult because we naturally are inclined to come back to that state of connection. And that's why they have to work so hard to maintain these false systems. They have to start from the beginning. They have to start from the child, and they have to just keep at it consistently with every single avenue of what our life is. That's why everything that we know is a lie. Because if there was any truth within this, then we would figure out that, oh man, none of this makes sense. They're lying about everything. And then we dismantle the whole thing, because naturally we want to come back to that state. And naturally we would. If all of those systems stopped right now, naturally we would. It wouldn't need anybody to teach it or to help make that happen if all of those things stopped. But unfortunately, those systems were so firmly in place, and there was no sign of any of that stopping until we got to just a further wash of pain and suffering. And again, that's not something that anyone who has awareness of can say in good conscience allow to happen, because we're moving away from this inherent knowing that this is wrong, and if there's something wrong, I need to do something about it, and if I don't do something about it, I'm culpable for it. I'm responsible for that as well. If I have the awareness and do nothing, I'm just as responsible for it, and it's hard to wrap around sometimes, because we've been conditioned into this, oh, it's not a big deal because it's not my problem. I'm not going to deal with it. It's not my problem. It's not my issue. It's not affecting me, or it's not affecting my family. So what do I care? And that right there is a absolute condition, a symptom of this inverted state. That's Satanism, if you want to just be very blunt about it. When and Satanism is just the inverted state. Some people get triggered by that word or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's the inverted state to where I'm disconnected, where I'm self-serving, where I'm willing to put myself and my interests above everything else, and nothing else really matters. Or I'm putting myself under everything else. Either one of those is unhealthy. Instead of just recognizing that equal opportunity, everyone's equal. We're not all equal in the sense that we're all the same, but we have equal opportunity to be here in this space as equal rights. There's no one above or below another. But we are all different. So that's the beauty that we get to celebrate, is these differences that we get to cherish, so that we can fall into these different roles of where I don't know where God is leading you. I don't know where that divine will is flowing through you to guide you into those spaces. So I don't have to try and figure that out and tell you what to do. That's not my job to do that. It's your job to figure that out. But I do have the ability to recognize when what you are doing is not fitting in with this collective desire to serve creation. And if your ideas and your actions demonstrate that all you're doing is serving yourself, then that's where it's like, okay, you're inverted. You have a distorted sense of reality. You've moved into this more relativism kind of, as if relativism is the height of it all, as if my limited perspective somehow trumps everything else, and it means more than everything else. And that's just simply not true. Our relative perception is there to provide texture of this experience, so that we could live more fully and share ideas and share all of these beautiful elements that keep us and make us appear differently, but also staying grounded in this idea that there is no disconnection. So why would I ever do anything to harm another? It's just madness at that point. But it's very easy to fall into once the systems are all there to accentuate and augment that. It's very easy to stay in that state when they're constantly pushing it left, right, and center, that you're either a worthless sinner, or you need to be constantly trying to get this money aspect so that you can wield your power over another. And all these different ways that they trick us into this mindset, but it's all elements of the same inversion, the same just distorted sense of reality that we have to rightfully establish. This is coming back into this righteousness. This is really all it takes. It's really not that complicated. I mean, on a physical level, making it, like the steps that we're going to need to do in order to collectively do it, and all of our society and all the structures that we do, that it might take some time for people, but it doesn't have to take that long. And the more that we drive home, the more that we come back home and come back to that initial starting point, that like I am connected, I am loved, God is love. There is no distinguishment between that. So anything that's not good, anything that's not this highest love is somehow been distorted. It's somehow been manipulated. It's somehow been flipped upside down. And so I need to be the one to flip that back up, or just reject that idea outright. That's not that's not what we're here for. That's not what we're doing here. It's just a byproduct of this of what gives the ability to experience this experience from all of these different perspectives. Is necessary to have this idea that I am separate. But it's not true. It's not inherently true. It's just there for the experience. And so the experience is very real because we're having this experience. So take it very seriously because it is very real. But it's also not something to lose yourself in, to the point to where you're willing to do anything to anybody else, forgetting that you're connected to all of it, forgetting that we all came from the same starting point. So it's a balance between those two realms, a balance between the physical and the metaphysical, the masculine and the feminine, the heaven and earth. Like it's both. And we walk perfectly in that balance, on that straight and narrow, on that line in between. And we acknowledge the purpose of both of these realms. We acknowledge the beauty that they provide. We acknowledge that, yes, I can dance and I can have fun, and I can feel these emotions. I can feel the sadness or the joy, and I can see things as beautiful. I can see things as incredible. I can touch and I can taste. I can embrace my senses. All of that, I get to have that. But don't lose yourself in that experience as well. Don't lose the fact that you are connected and you are so much more than those things. They're just there to provide and give everything and make it just incredible for what it is. I mean, we're weaving this incredible tapestry. Each one of us has a different thread, a different color thread. And so we're weaving it all together, and it's just growing and growing and growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. And it doesn't ever have to stop. It never has to stop. But if we choose to be a victim of this reality and say that, oh, woe is me, I'm stuck in it, then okay, well, enjoy that experience. It's not true. You chose to be here. We all chose to be here. We all chose to do this. This is here for us. It's here for us to continue having this incredible experience for none other than just to have fun and to create. That's it. That's beautiful.
Yeah, well, love and creation are the same frequency, 5 to 8 hertz, which is also the frequency of the earth. And the anagram of earth is heart. So when you start looking at how, the play on words, and another one that came to mind with the great inversion is the flip of evil is live. And the opposite of live is death. So they flipped live to evil to steer us towards death. And another one I know Charlie talks about a lot is good. They chuck in an extra O and it's really God. So what makes us feel good is the right direction, but not a temporary high like, oh, I've got a new car, or, I just got a promotion. That's only temporary, because as that sense of good has been given to us, it can also be taken away by us losing our new car or getting a demotion or losing our job. So that's only a temporary high. But when we can cultivate the permanent good feeling of good in us, what expands our heart every day, just by even having nothing, just by being a channel for divinity and knowing we're in this good God place, that's the ultimate high, and that can never be taken away from us. And it's that feeling of love which then creates heaven on earth, this divinity, because it's the same frequency. And I don't know, that's how I experience it.
100%. I mean, it's our natural state. It happens without us trying. We don't need to make it happen. It just is. When we cut all the bullshit, when we cut all the stuff that holds us back from that experience and just naturally be as we are, this is how we exist as. And so when we stop trying to think our way out of this and just recognize that the thinking element is just a part of this experience, I am not my thoughts. I am not my conscious mind. My conscious mind is a tool for me to use in order to transmute that divine will and have it to create something within this realm. That's what the manifestation, how that power actually comes through. It has to go through those filters, a sort of step down approach If you're familiar with electricity and how they transmit it and stuff like that, it has to step down from a higher voltage to a lower voltage in order to get to your house. The same sort of thing applies with how God gives us this will, but it's a high voltage. We can't transmute it in that sort of way. So that's where the conscious mind brings this highest will, drives us into that conscious thought. We pair those together in a balanced form and create. That's where creation comes from. So it's this, and that's the balance of the masculine and the feminine, because the masculine is the thinking mind. The masculine is the will. The feminine is the receiving mind. So she receives the divinity. She receives that which God provides, and he brings it into action. He puts it forward and gives the structure and makes it physical. So but you have to have both in order to create the child, father, mother, child. This is creation. So this is us. And so when we can recognize this beautiful part of this process and not try and fight it, not try and step away from it, not try and be overly masculine in the sense of, I got to make everything happen. And that's how we've all been conditioned to be. We're all conditioned to be overly masculine, all been conditioned to be overly in our thinking mind, overly thinking about how to do everything. I've got to think my way out of things. I've got to I've got to build my, whatever. That's necessary in a small amount of time. When as soon after we receive the wisdom, receive that divine influence from her, from our feminine side. And so that's why the attack on the feminine has been so diligent, because they don't want us to receive God's wisdom. In order to receive, we have to embrace our feminine. And so this is why they've attacked everything to this level. That's why they've attacked any strong-willed women, because a strong-willed woman has the ability to tame her masculine side, but she's more naturally inclined to still be in that feminine side. So that's why they had the witch hunts and had to get rid of them as much as they could, because those were the women that were going to teach us, continue reminding us of this beautiful process. And the same with the men too. Any men who were genuinely in touch with their feminine side, not this distorted version that we see now where men want to be women. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about genuinely men who are in touch with that care and compassion side of them. They were wiped out as well. It's a consistent process where they have to get rid of anyone who exhibits this balanced approach to life, and they want to keep us in balance. So that's just another mechanism in place that continues to distort us. They find ways to kill these people that are exuding this kind of balanced approach of being in touch with their divinity and allowing that to transmit into conscious will and allowing that to create the action necessary, which is the child. And they don't want that to happen, because then they know that God is flowing to that person like no other. And as soon as that individual has that frame of reference point, that they're connected with God and no one can do anything about that, they're powerful. And just that power alone is a threat to the very system that is inverted. They can't allow any of it to continue. They can't allow any of it to live or to flourish or to do anything, to have any influence. So they have to wipe it out. They have to stamp it out. They have to admonish it as many ways as they can. And so with that same diligence that they've applied to all that which is righteous throughout the last age, with that same diligence that they've wiped out every ounce of our our balanced self, we have to do the same with the inverted self. We have to have that same approach. Not that everyone needs to die necessarily, but once a line is crossed, once someone has gotten to that point where they're willing to abdicate this sense of responsibility and to take ownership of themselves, to take ownership of this process, then it's like you're creating a scenario where we're going to fall again if you're allowed to continue operating as you are. You were so inverted, and nothing I can do can help you in that state. So this I don't know exactly how to look, but at the first sweep of this will be going through every ounce of society and diligently checking everybody to see where they aligned. Are you in an inverted state, or are you aligned with that which is good? What did you do with this inverted system? Did you push the mask on your employees? Did you make your people take these jabs? Did you whatever the case may be? Like, that's what we're going to have to go through and have the appropriate response to each of those infractions, because they have given up their sense of connection. They're so far inverted, not that they can't come back, but we provide that path of redemption to say, this is where you went wrong. Here's how you can come back. For some, some it's inexcusable and execution is necessary. But if that's not the case, if it hasn't crossed that line, then there's always a path to redemption. There's always a space to where they can atone for them, but it has to come from them. No one else can make them do it. No one can punish them into that space. It has to be from the space of them saying, I'm okay. I recognize where I was inverted. I recognize that I had fallen from the state. I want to come back to my own divinity. I want to come back to this connection. I recognize that I was willing to harm another. I was willing to not do the right thing in that moment. I was willing to say that my life was worth, or my sense of self, this false sense of self, was worth more than taking care of our collective self, our whole self. And so that's the kind of examination that we're all going to go through, to really see, so that we can do the right thing and move back from that state. But it will take some work. I'm sure there's going to be much discussion around like how to approach that and what to do about certain things and whatever else. But it's all about staying consistent on this idea. It's not an idea. Consistent on this absolute fundamental truth of this creation, that God is good. We are part of creation. Therefore, we are good. We are connected with God, and there's nothing that ever changes that, except for our choosing, except for us leaving that space. As soon as we leave that space, then we introduce all of these problems. We introduce all the possibilities of this potential of this nastiness to flourish. And so it will hopefully be a continued reminder so that we don't ever do it again.
And I think, I know I mentioned, the education system and entertainment before, but I think I forgot to say religion, which has maybe been one of the largest control over humanity and this perpetuation of the lie. So I feel it's important that we cover that, Justin, but also as you're talking now, it's this ego thing, isn't it, of or people have got debt in the bank that they feel they had to maybe put the mask or enforce their will on their employers because they had either an ego to maintain or debts to pay. It's all about this, looking good in society, and that role, that inversion that we've been taught that makes us someone special. And so I think that's why a lot of people, did choose to take the jab, because they thought that was the only way to maintain their foothold on life, and they couldn't let go of that and have faith that there is another way once we do come into in tune, frequency wise, in tune with divinity. So they were the two major, I feel like, maybe nooses around people's necks. But the religion one, would you like to touch on that, Justin?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, just that perception of powerlessness is really what trips us all up. To have this idea that I am incapable of doing the right thing because of the circumstances, instead of just acknowledging that if the circumstances present themselves and it seems like it's daunting, well, the circumstances needed to be daunting for me because I'd abdicated my sense of power, my responsibility this far to drive me to this state where I needed to make some pretty drastic actions. But people don't take that as an opportunity, and they just fall further into it. And that's been the slippery slope that's gotten us to this point, to where we're saying like, oh, I have no power, I'm just going to do whatever I'm told. It's just my job, I'm just doing what I'm told, and all these sorts of things. But that all stems from the same sort of powerlessness, the same sort of inverted reality that I'm not connected with God, that I can't even trust God because I don't even have a connection with God. I believe that, and it's not true because we're always connected, but we can believe it to the point to where we're able to justify doing anything. And it's not to blame anybody, because like we don't need to blame anybody. We just need to acknowledge what happened. We acknowledge what happened truthfully and then work through that. And so this is with the religious aspect, it's the exact same, like that's probably the most conniving, malicious, manipulative nonsense as part of this inversion, because they take this innate connection, they take this inherent knowing that we are connected with something larger than ourselves, we're connected with all that there is. They know that this is a part of us because this is how creation is built, so it has to be a part of us. They know this, but they exploit it by trying to insert this religious institution to just pump you full of dogma that just further slips you and pulls you away from that connection point, so that you start believing that, oh, I'm not connected. God is some white dude on a far off distant planet somewhere, constantly judging us and telling us we have to do these things or we're going to go to hell and all this other kinds of stuff, instead of acknowledging that no, this creation was created perfectly as a good creation, and we're a part of it. God is connected with us always. There is no separation. And the only reason that we do experience different ways of experiencing this creation is to help guide us to that space of maximum potential. So that's where the idea of like sin come into being, and people have a really hard time with it, and I get why, because it's the dogma from these religious institutions that program this wrong idea into what sin is. But what is sin really? It's taking away. Sin in Spanish is to take, is without. So sin is just anything that's taking us away from this connection point, anything that's taking us away from our highest potential. So what is sin? So if I'm going to eat a bunch of poison, yeah, you're taking yourself away from your divinity. You're taking yourself away from this connection point. You're saying, you're justifying in your mind by lying to yourself that somehow I can make this decision and it's going to be okay, in the sense that I'm not going to be damaging my body. I'm not honoring the fact that this body is incredibly perfect and it's giving me the ability to walk in this space with perfection. And so when I start to justify these things, then I take us away from that. So it's not something to shame anybody, though. Like, there's no shame involved. It's just cause and effect. Like, it's very cut and dry. There's not like a weight that's carried to it. God doesn't put weights on us. That's the creation of the hands of man. But God does make a creation that's set up with very very structured. It's very structured in that sort of way. If we're gonna pretend like I am something else that I'm not, if I'm gonna pretend like I'm a carnivore when I'm not, then, and I try and eat the meat, then I'm going to suffer the consequences of eating foods that are not designed for me. This is not God punishing us. This is just me not wanting to acknowledge what is, and this is what is. This is the natural creation and how we set it up. And so religion comes in and they take this cause and effect, which is very true, and we know this is true, but then they try and insert this blame and shame aspects to it, which has nothing to do with God, has absolutely nothing to do with his creation whatsoever. And then they say that we're the one that connects with God. You can't connect with God. We're the ones in between. So you better listen to us and you better pay us your money or you're going to hell. And then they invent this idea of hell being another place and heaven being another place too, which is complete bullshit. It's not another place. It's right here, right now. It's a state of being that we can exist in at any moment. And so, yes, if you want to hurt yourself in that kind of way by eating things, just to use the example of physicality, it's easier to see. But if you want to eat things that don't align with who you are, then yes, you're going to be putting yourself further into hell, because you're creating a horrific, suffering-filled scenario where your body is degrading, your body's decaying, and that doesn't feel good. You can't operate from that high vibrational state when you are doing that. So yes, you are moving into hell, but of your own doing. Nobody's putting you there. God's not putting you there. God's trying to guide you back to that space of maximum potential. He's like, I didn't make you here to fall into that state. You're here to create. You're here to activate and to be the highest version of yourself, so that you can be the best and do the best in the unique ways that only you can. And that's for you to find out and us to all discover and share together. Like, that's what this whole experience is about. So everything that we experience is just gently at first nudging us back into that space of maximum potential. So that's where all of these kind of ideas come from, because it's about observing the natural creation and how it's set up. But then religion comes in and they try and insert themselves and say that, oh no, we're the ones who are telling you how this creation is set up. And yes, you can see things by observing them naturally, but in reality, you don't have to worry about all of that, because Jesus died for your sins, and that means you can just keep on sinning and it doesn't really matter, and you just get one life. And it's going to suck much better as long as you just keep paying us your tithing, paying us your your money, because God really needs your money, right? And and they create this whole infrastructure that just really just distorts us further away from our inherent connection and our inner knowing of how this creation is set up. It doesn't take very long to look around to see that if I go around and I'm manipulative and I'm stealing and I'm doing all these sort of horrible things to other people, it comes back and it bites me very quickly. Like karma is so real. It is so real in that sense because it helps to prevent us from falling too far into this distorted view of inversion. But they've done it. They've crafted these little demons have crafted such a system to get us to do it to ourselves so that they're not even doing it to us. We have been tricked so far into this inverted reality that we're the ones that are causing all the problems that we face, and then we don't even have the awareness to see this is why these problems are being created, is because of my actions. So again, I don't take personal responsibility because I am a worthless sinner or whatever. And this lie just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So religion would probably be the greatest form of that deception. It really kind of encapsulates it all on just the depth that they'd be willing to go to hijack our innate connection, our knowing of our divinity, our knowing of our connection, our knowing of these karmic cause and effect principles of this reality, and then invert them into this distorted view of it, to take this incredible book of the Bible, to mistranslate parts of it, to teach us how to read it improperly, to teach us to view it as a literal book, instead of recognizing that this book was designed to be a handbook, like a guide of how to live the fullest and highest expression of you, so that you could look at all these different characters and unravel how they show up in your life. Where do you show up as these different characters? How can you recognize when you're beating yourself up, when you're doing things that are harming yourself, so that you can come back into that seat of power and be the Christ? No one else. That's the whole goal, is to be the Christ, to not be anybody else. You know, you and of course we stray and we find ourselves in situations, you know, we go through challenges, like circumstances present different things. It's an ebb and flow, but the goal is to come back into that balance, to be the Christ in every situation. And that's the whole point of the one true story that all these stories are based off of. All these ancient books, everything's based on the one true story, which is the hero's journey, which is the story of us, which is the story of us playing this game where we pretend to lose ourselves so that we can find ourselves once again. But it's a dangerous game. It has risk involved, and these are the risks that have been exploited. This losing ourselves aspect, which provides texture, it provides the fun challenge of doing it and coming back together again. They took advantage of that. They took advantage of us losing ourselves, and they drove us into further losing ourselves to the point where we're like, oh, I have no idea what's going on. I don't even know who I am. I don't even know any of this anymore. And I have no ability to step out of it. So, but like I said, God uses even these horrific examples to transmute and turn to the highest good. So we can use this horrific example of where we can to transmute this into the space of maximum potential, so we can experience this feeling of bondage where we're shackled in the darkest corner of the pits of hell. And we can experience the exaltation of breaking those chains and rising up into freedom, so that we can rise to new heights. And so we're going to get that. We're going to get that beautiful exaltation, that beautiful feeling of coming out of it, and also have the reminder to be very diligent in ensuring that this doesn't happen. So we'll just keep telling these stories over and over and over again, so that we don't forget. We'll find new ways to tell it. We'll find new ways to demonstrate it, to portray this, so that we remember. But in order for those lessons from these stories to really be integrated, we can't be disconnected from the story. We have to recognize that this is the story of us. This is what happens when we do these kinds of things. There are no monsters out there from the mythological perspective, but they're not real in that perspective. But we do turn into monsters when we're not in the power seat. When we let the thinking mind steer us into whatever direction, we turn into monsters. So this is all just a reminder. Don't be a monster. And if you see somebody else being a monster, like, hey, poke them. Be like, hey, why are you being such a monster? You know, like, what's going on? Let's talk about it. Let's figure things out. Let's ask some questions. You know, like, that's really all that. Once we become in such a balanced state in society, all we're going to ever have to do is just ask questions to anybody who starts to stray away from the path, starts to stray away from the sense of who they are. It's just like, hey man, like this, you did some things that's clearly not in alignment with this connection point. So what's going on? Where have we fallen off? Like, what can we do to help? How can we get you back to this space? And it won't have to get any worse than that. It really won't. As long as we're diligent, as long as we're good at addressing any of these scenarios in the space of, like, you know, somebody tells a lie to somebody, it's like, oh, everything halts. This was an infraction. This was something that there was clearly some disconnection. The only way that somebody could justify telling this lie to somebody is if they actually believed that they were in a disconnected state, even if just for a moment. But everything needs to stop. We need to everybody, we need to focus in on this one point. Let's address this, because this is a learning opportunity. This ball in evolution. So there's nothing wrong with that, but it's an opportunity for us to continue staying in that space so that everything always drives us to new heights instead of falling to new lows. We don't want to do that anymore. We don't want to do that part.
Oh, amazing. You articulated that so beautifully. I also love the rainbow analogy, like what you were saying about heaven and hell being states of being. Well, one, that takes me back to, I'll probably lose track now, but, you know, when we're in the masculine mind, we're either in the past or the future, whereas the feminine is the now moment of creation. So, you know, being in our head takes us out of the ultimate state of creation, which can only ever be the present moment. So where was I? The rainbow. So ultimately, if we are experiencing a shitty life, we could maybe do the analogy is we're in the red spectrum of the rainbow. And let's just say that is a version of hell. And so all we can see is red. Now, every color has a frequency, and that's an energy. Energy is perfect. So as we rise our individual frequency, we then come up into the orange and we experience a reality that's a bit better than hell, but still pretty uncomfortable. And you can take yourself up by shifting your energy, our energy within us, to align with a color of the rainbow. And ultimately, when I would say when you get to, what's the last one? Indigo, no, purple.
Violet,
Yeah.
yeah.
Where we could say when you've gone through all that, you've got your perfect white light, which, you know, is heaven. So, you know, we shift ourselves. Every frequency exists. We move ourselves through it. And every color of the rainbow is a different aspect of the world. So if we're having a good world, we're enjoying our life, we're above the green arc, because that's the heart chakra and love, and it's like being an airplane above the clouds. You know, the clouds are maybe at level yellow coming into green, and once we lift ourselves up, we can experience, you know, that feeling when you're in a plane and you look out and you're above the clouds and the sun's shining, and you just know that nothing else can come into your spectrum because you're above the clouds. That gives the power
Well
back
said.
to us.
Absolutely. Yeah, very well said. It is this, and I love the color analogy too, because this is what ultimately this whole experience is this white photonic light, which is the singular creation point. That's the initial spark transmuted through that prism, which is the triangle, which is the creation. That's the Trinity to create the 7 colors. And so this is just an incredible analogy to show that every ounce of this creation is purposeful, but we get to choose how we operate within this space. So when we find ourselves in a certain state, it's there to drive us to finding balance, you know, to ultimately to finding that peace within, so that we are the combination of all the colors. We are the rainbow child, you know. And when we can recognize this, then we are operating at full capacity. We're operating with the full ability to acknowledge the sort of you know, baser aspects of emotions and sexuality and that kind of thing, which is, it's very purposeful. Like, it's very purposeful to give us this texture, because without any of these elements, this creation loses it loses a whole layer to it. It loses a whole, like, vibrancy. So the whole rainbow gives the whole vibrancy. It gives the whole spectrum to play with. And so then it becomes, again, stepping out of this victim consciousness, this idea that I'm bound to it, and acknowledging that it's all there for me to use and utilize and rise from, and whatever, to come back to that space of balance so that I can be a better version of me, always, never getting to a space of stagnation, never, it's just always, it's a perpetually growing. And so I find groundedness in the constant growth.
And the perfection of the human body is that we were gifted these emotions and these feelings because that's our tool. Like when we're feeling shitty, when we're feeling sad and in shame and guilt, what shifts us out of that low energetic frequency is at some point, our determination to want to change. And this is where the courage comes in as well. I think courage is such an important part of it, to actually take the steps to shift and make change. I mean, for me, any emotional uncomfortableness means I'm not in a state of alignment with love. Because when we're in a state of alignment with love, we're feeling this euphoria and this just beautiful peace and serenity. So I say, okay, I've fallen off the road to love, get back on it. It's a matter of falling off, bringing ourselves back. And this is what the beautiful tool of feelings and emotions serve us, to get us back on track, because ultimately we all want love and peace and heart unity. And we're told the great lie is to get it by being someone in the future, by buying something, by having so much money. But it's not. It's about just creating our feelings so that we have cultivated this beautiful state of being and bringing heaven into our world, and ultimately then into our family and our community and into the greater world.
Yeah, well said. There's no one else to be but to be. There's anytime we try and compare ourselves at that point, then we are entertaining that inverted reality, because all of a sudden I'm not connected with myself. I'm not connected with the fact that I am divine. I am divinity incarnate in this physical body. And so I'm here to be exactly as I am, and cherish that, to cherish, there's no comparison. So coming back to that realization is incredible. And just to touch on the emotions aspect, one thing that really helps me with anytime I'm feeling overly emotional about whatever, especially like, a sense of sadness or any of those, it's like, I really love to stay within gratitude, even in those moments too, and just say like, wow, I get to experience this. Like, I get to experience what this feels like, and to be here with these feelings, and to go through that whole incredible tapestry of what these emotions can give to me. How boring would it be without that? Like, how dull would it be if we did not have that layer of this experience to have? Even if it feels like it's the worst of the worst, and it feels, just awful, like dismal or sad, I can still have gratitude for that. I can still have gratitude for those emotions, to say like, man, I get to be here. I truly do. I get to experience that. And it's beautiful. It truly is. It's incredible to get to have that, because with that comes the whole range of emotions and everything that we get to experience all in between. And we can't have that without all of it. And so this just provides that texture. And then when you come from that space of gratitude, that's why gratitude is it's like a cheat code to this experience. When you can really unlock and really recognize that gratitude is the secret to everything. I'm always grateful because I'm always shown exactly what's for me. I'm always guided to those experiences that are for me. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that because I know that it's always for my highest good, no matter what. Not even if I don't understand why, the details of what's going on, even if I don't really get the exact reasons of why I'm experiencing the things that I am, I'm still grateful for it, because I know and I trust, coming back to this space, that God is good. I'm connected with God. I'm connected with the self, and therefore there is nothing that takes away from that.
So good. And everyone's got their own way, haven't they? I mean, if I'm ever feeling sad, I mean, it's not only when I'm feeling sad, but I take that energy because I can feel it in my heart, and I'll write something beautiful, but I'll write it so that I process it and it comes out as a beautiful gift to myself, because within that piece of writing, whether it's poetry or prose, I've done the internal work, and I've shifted, and I've started with sadness, and I've created beauty out of it. And, it's, and now whether someone else might do that as actually going and volunteering at for a charity, or, with their neighbor, every bit of sadness, you can take the steps and create something beautiful out of it. And this is actively shifting the energy into gratitude. Well, that's such a high frequency state of being, that if we can find gratitude now, whether it's only to have the next breath, or to have 2 legs, or to have a roof over our head. I know, I brought my 2 boys up alone, and well, struggled financially then, but I was always grateful that I had a roof over my head. I had even if it was just baked beans and chicken legs in the fridge, I was always grateful for that. Always grateful that instead of begrudging paying my rent, I was always grateful that I had the money just to pay my rent. And this whole frequency of gratitude then just creates more and more to be grateful for. And then just abundance flows in. And it's just like, it's amazing. That is really the miracle.
It is. I mean, that's alchemy. What you're talking about, that is alchemy of turning lead into gold. This is this transmutation process that we're always capable of doing in every moment, and we're always invited to do it in every moment. This is the invitation of playing in this experience of always being in that alchemical, beautiful, grateful state, so that I can recognize that it's all there for me to transmute into gold. That's what it's for. It's there so I can find the gold with everything. And once you have, and of course it's a process that takes, it's always, there's always learning within it. It's never something that we master inherently always, but it's something that we can really practice. And you don't even really have to try, but once you start to calibrate yourself and you're in that state, then it just becomes a natural state. This is our natural state, to be in this state where it's like, okay, everything that I'm receiving is there for me to transmute into gold. So everything is there to give me that highest. So it's not my job to figure out why this is happening. It's just my job to like work with it, to transmute it, to see it, and see it for that highest potential, so that we can bring in that gold. And then everything, everything, that's the Midas touch, right? Everything that we touch turns to gold. And then when we are alchemically working in this state, when we are these alchemists, then everything that we do turns to gold. Everything that we encounter, every conversation that we have, it's just this constant process and it's infectious. It's magnetic. It drives people to see it. People want to recognize it, and they want to do it themselves. So then it spreads. And so that's why the cabal had to be so diligent at stomping it out, because they know as soon as they have these alchemists out there transmuting at this level, they can't stop it, because it grows and it grows and it grows until everyone is just an alchemist, and everyone's just doing this incredible process.
So true. And, everything is an opportunity to choose love. Whether we're in our deepest, darkest moment, we have the opportunity to choose love in that moment. We're not helpless, and it's knowing that power. As I said, even if it's just smiling at someone, if we can't manage that, it's being grateful for the next breath. If that's all we can do, breathe. I say, breathing in, divinity, breathing out love. We are the tool. Breathe that in, breathe it out into the world. We are the alchemists. I love it. It's and when you realize this power, how they've shielded us from this power by trying to program that we weren't able to do this, that it was something external to us and not the beautiful tool of the human body and its feelings and its awareness of pain. Pain is the greatest gift. If we are in pain, whether it's mental, physical, or emotional, we are not in alignment with love. And we have the power then to shift that through the tool of gratitude. Is the easiest way.
It is. It really is, because then you cannot be a victim when you're grateful. You can't be in this powerless state when you're grateful. All you can do is see it for what it actually is, because grateful is not even really a state that we have to strive for. I mean, yes, to sort of break free from the conditioning, it's helpful to have ways to step out of it, practices to kind of get into that state. But it is our natural state when we recognize that I am connected with God. God is good. This creation is good. Then there's nothing that exists that's not something to be grateful for. Nothing exists outside of that. It just is natural, because we're all like, wow, okay, this is more opportunities. This is more opportunities to just shine even brighter, and to touch even more, and to create even more, and it just never ends. It never has to stop. It never stops growing. We just get further and further and further into the state. And that's why Trump likes to say you're going to keep winning, 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 winning. You're going to get so sick of winning. But we're not going to get sick of winning. We're just going to love doing it again and again and again, and more and more and more, and then it accentuates everybody else. Everyone augments and plays into everybody else, and nobody has to create any system to make that happen. It just is natural. Again, proving this fundamental truth that God is good, this creation is good, and we are good as a part of it. The only time that we're not is when we invert ourselves, when we abdicate from that sense of connection. So stay there, and stay in that state of surrender. That's why surrender is such a powerful state to be in, acknowledging that I don't have the highest vantage point. I can only see from my perspective, and my perspective is so valuable in order for me to be able to transmute into that way that's sort of individualized and allows this sense of individual creation to flow through me. But I need to trust, always be in that state of trust, trusting that I'm always being guided to that highest potential, no matter what happens to me, no matter if it's the worst possible, ideas on things that could happen to you, it's still guiding you to that state. And the more that we operate within that space of trust, those things don't happen anymore, because they only existed in order to inspire you to get into that space of trust. So if we do that consciously, then we don't have to go through those experiences. So it takes some recalibrating, because the entire system was designed to instill this trauma. It's designed to make this seem like this is not true. It takes what is natural and tries to make the unnatural seem natural. And so that's why they have to be so consistent and so diligent in making every system align with that, making no sign of anything that is natural stand out. Everything unnatural has to seem like that's the only way. And then people are like, well, that's just the way that it's always been. That's just the way that it is. So fuck it. I might as well go get drunk or whatever, like that's the level of apathy that they want to drive us into, to where we don't care and we don't want to care because we're disconnected. So just come back to the connection point. There is nothing that exists outside of that, It's incredible.
It certainly is. And I mean, we're speaking from experience. So we're not just like read this idea in a book and we're trying to sell it. I mean, I just speak from my own pure joy and peace, because I've done it through my life, to get to this point. And well, is there anything else that needs to be said in this conversation, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, it's like this is this beautiful poetic exchange that we always can have in sort of describing the indescribable, because ultimately this whole experience is, there's no way to put it into words. There's no way to actually categorize it and to classify it, and we shouldn't get stuck on classifying it. So this is my experience. This is Gemma's experience, and so don't take this as your experience. You need to go out and try this, but I can promise you that from my experience, this is the way that creation is set up. It's designed to instill you and bring you to this space. So don't lose that sense of power by just attaching to another idea, like just because Justin said it or just because Gemma said it, that must be the case. Because when we're thinking about it from that perspective, we're not trusting. We're building this false reality that I'm attaching myself to, which is ultimately dogmatic, and that's where the idolatry comes into play. And so it's not about any of that. It's not, don't idolize any of us. Don't look to us for any answers. Look to us for inspiration. You know, we're here to inspire. We're here to inspire you to take that process and do it for yourself. Become that alchemist and see what happens. Live in gratitude and see what happens. It's there, and it's easy to prove. It doesn't take very long. You can do it. You can make that flip right now, but you can't fake it. Don't try and fake it. Don't try and think your way into it. Don't try and just pretend to be grateful. Don't try and just say things. It has to be true. That trust and that surrender has to be true. There's not there, God, there's no way to fake that. There's no way to say and just pretend, oh, I'm just going to surrender today by just talking about it. No. If I still have these resistances in my mind, if I'm still trying to think of ways to like, oh, well, I'm going to try and surrender, but I'm still worried about this thing, or I'm still afraid of that thing, or, you know, what if this happens? What if this happens? It's like, no, you're not there. You're not in that space of trust. You've lost it, and you're disconnected. And so come back to that. You know, just realize this, like what I'm saying, God is good. We are connected to God. God created this whole creation, so creation is good. So that's it. And God is love. You know, this is there's no distinguishment between these two. This is this benevolent force that drives this whole creation, and it's very much a part of it. We can lose sight of it if we want to, but we are the ones doing it to ourselves. We are the ones abdicating our sense of power. No one's doing it for us. People can trick us into doing it. So that's where like the idea of like black magic spells or dark magic or any of that kind of stuff come into play. Nobody's doing it to us. Nobody's making us do anything. The only way that those spells work is if they convince us to do it to ourselves. If they trick us into giving up our seat of power. That's why Charlie likes to say, you know, that there's no such thing as a knockout from the satanic realm. You know, they can't actually knock us out. They can't give us a KO, but they can convince us into a TKO. They can give us a technical knockout. And that only happens when we give in or say, I don't want to fight anymore, or I don't want to play this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. And ultimately, that's what we need to do, is say, I don't want to play this anymore, but not in the space that they're not on their terms, not on those conditions. In the true conditions, if I'm not playing your game because your game is worthless, your game is nothing, and you are nothing, you have no power here. And once you stand there, once you stand sovereign, S over reign in that space, then there's absolutely nothing that can ever take you from that, ever, 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 until you give it up. And there might be temptations to do so, but you have to be the one to do it. So just don't do that. Stay connected, stay in that space of power, and you can't go wrong.
And it came to me now to say, like, what's the worst that could happen? Whatever situation we're in, what's the worst that could happen? We die. Well, if you've found a meaning to the human existence and you're aware of something other than the human existence, of this God of creation, of ultimate perfection for even through death, then that fear of death goes. Are we afraid of being evicted from our house? Well, you know, at the end of the day, we'll survive. And if we don't, again, it's death. So it's getting this meaningful life, this higher drive for expansion. And once we can let go of fear of death, of anything that they can do to us, they're powerless.
Yes, absolutely. So well said. Incredible point to bring up. And I mean, just look at the film Braveheart and look at the very end of that film, where, you know, if anyone's not familiar with that movie, sorry to kind of spoil the ending, but it's a powerful movie. You should watch it anyway, even if you haven't seen it. The ending scene where he's being tortured on the table, and his army has lost, and the corrupt rulers have captured him, and they're torturing him, and they're trying to get him to give in. They're trying to get him to abdicate and to give up his power in that moment. And so they're torturing him, and he's going through the most gruesome things you can imagine. And at the very end, you know, when they're like, this is it, we're going to keep torturing you to the point of your death. And the corrupt man is trying to get him to kiss his ring, to say, basically pay homage to him. You know, lay down your sense of control, lay down your power, and abdicate from that. And what does he do? He shouts freedom out into the crowd. And he's basically saying, fuck you. I'm not going to do that. You have no power here, not even under duress of my physical body. You have nothing. And when we can maintain that sense of sovereignty, despite what odds we face, then truly there's nothing that can stop us. And I know that even in those most extreme instances, like say there was, somebody was being put to death in that sort of space, if they maintain their sense of sovereignty in that moment, I know that God smiles at that, and I know that God is going to take away the pain and the suffering from that instance, because you are encouraging courage, you are encouraging that level of bravery, and that's where He wants all of us to be. That's where He wants all of us to be at every single moment, so that we never give that up, no matter what. Because when we can have that strength, when we can hold on to that sense of connection, then that means that we're always trusting and surrendering to God. Always, we're always connected to Him willingly. He doesn't want us to force us to connect with Him. He doesn't want to force us to love Him. He loves us, but He wants us to want to love Him. And this is where this free will comes into play, where we have to give up our free will. It's like He gave us free will so that we'd want to give it up. That's the whole point of this, to want to give up our free will, so that He is using our will always. And that will is trusting that it's always going to lead us to that space of maximum growth, because it's ultimately where we want to go. There's no difference, that's the highest potential. So why would we not want to go there? What else is there to do?
And that love and freedom, as you're talking of God, the words are coming through. Another way of talking of God is love and freedom and unity. In a world with love, freedom, and unity, what else do you want? But we create that. Oh God, well, I love this conversation, Justin. Is there anything else that needs to be said, or we'll go out on this high?
Yeah, I can't think of anything else. Just really examine their own lives and see at what points am I giving away my power? At what points am I abdicating this sense of connections? At what point am I letting the fears dictate my reality? Love-based decisions versus fear-based decisions. It's a very easy kind of calibration to see, am I being driven to do this because of fear, or am I being driven this because it's leading me to my highest potential, which would be from love? And when we can recalibrate that and really distinguish between these two, we can start to reclaim our power and stop giving it away so easily. And that's it. That's all we have to do. And that's all. So yeah, that's it. That's it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Justin. Thanks for bringing your love, your light, your energy, your wisdom. Amazing. I love having you as a regular here on Man Speak. We'll drop Justin's link below, where you can find him, your amazing Telegram chats, all those links that you can ask Justin questions and he'll answer them. And also that link that you spoke of earlier on to Darth. Awesome.
Dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks for watching.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say thanks for having me. This has been an absolute joy to be a part of, and I love doing these. I love having these talks. So anytime you want to have me back, I'll be here. Appreciate it, sister.
Thank you. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll be back in a couple of days with more Man Speak. And if you could like, share, subscribe, get this beautiful energy out to create our new earth, and we're all manifesting heaven. So bring it on.
Absolutely. Bye, guys.